Hello Year 7, it's Mrs. Gillian. I'm here to talk to you about how we use sentence structures effectively to craft our response. So if you go and show my homework and get the task sheet, it'll be writing task 4 and we'll go through and have a look at it in a little bit more detail together. So the first thing to think about is the different sentence types. So you've got some definitions in front of you. The first sentence type is a simple sentence. It contains one idea and one main verb. So, for example, it'll be something short and snappy like the cat sat on the mat. One idea, one verb. Next, we've got compound sentences. These contain two independent clauses joined together with a simple conjunction. For example, the cat sat on the mat and ate a mouse. Next, we've got complex sentences. These contain a main clause and a subordinate clause. So the main clause makes sense by itself, whereas the subordinate clause relies on the main clause for it to make sense. So for example, we could have the cat, who was very hungry, sat on the mat. The main clause would be the cat sat on the mat. The subordinate clause would be the bit in the middle, the who was very hungry, which doesn't make sense by itself. Complex sentences are really good for embedding extra information and giving you more detail about something. A minor sentence doesn't always have to have a main verb. So it could be something that you want to draw attention to in your work, something that you want to highlight. For example, hungry cat. An imperative is a command. So this is where we put the verb at the front of the sentence to give an instruction or a command. For example, sit on the mat. A declarative is simply a statement. So it's a declaration of a fact. So it could be the cat sat on the mat, and here we can see where a sentence type can fall into more than one category, or it could be something like the cat was black and white. And an interrogative is a question. So it will always end with a question mark, and it will be something like, why did the cat sit on the mat? And it gives a little bit of a variety to our sentence types. Have a look then at the starter. See if you can then match up the sentence types to the examples. You don't have to do this at the same time, so you can watch the video all the way through and then go back to the activities, or you can pause the video and do the activities as we go along. It is entirely up to you. So have a look at that one. Please be aware that some examples might match to more than one sentence type. So you might think, oh, that's an example of a declarative. However, it's also a compound sentence. That's okay. You can have more than one sentence types for the examples. Moving on then. Task 1 asks you to look back at your wonderful work last week from your icons. Now, I saw some really good examples from last week's work, so I think that's really good. Many of you did start to contain a range of sentence types already, but this is something that we really do need to look at and consciously craft during this session. So have a look back for your work from last week. See if you can identify a simple sentence, a compound sentence, complex sentence, an interrogative sentence, or an imperative sentence in your own work. If you can't, or if you didn't do as much as you would have wanted to, perhaps you can create some new examples of your own right now. Then have a look at task 2. If you look at the extract, there's no punctuation in order to separate the ideas. Your job is to go through and have a think first of all about where you're going to put your full stops. Where does it make sense to break one sentence before you're going to start into another one? Have a look for your commas. Have a look for any other punctuation types, something perhaps a bit more sophisticated. Perhaps a colon or a semicolon needs to go in there as well. Have a think. How would you punctuate that extract? Okay, so we're going to go and move on to the main focus of today's session, which is all about why sentence variety is important. So, sentence structures are incredibly important to make sure that your reader stays engaged with what you're saying. If sentence structures aren't varied, readers are more likely to stop reading. So let's have a look at the extract together. It says, This sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands some variety. So let's have a look at the sentence types that's used here. So we seem to have a repetition of many simple sentences. So we've not got any variety. We've just got 5 words in each one. Everything's starting to become a little bit more monotonous, more boring. It's not particularly engaging. However, if we look at another example, we'll see what happens when we vary the sentence length. So now listen. I vary the sentence length and create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences, and I use sentences of medium length. And sometimes, when I'm certain the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, sounds that say, listen to this, it is important. So we can see from that example that in varying the sentence structure, we're almost creating a different rhythm. We're creating more interest, more engagement. We're highlighting certain features. So we might look at the music. We wanted that to stand out. So we used it by itself to highlight that idea. We might use simple sentences, again, to bring the reader into the focus and say, this is important, this stands out. And then we might look at the more complex sentences where we're embedding some clauses, we're embedding that detail, and we're building up an idea. So it sounds better, the writing flows more easily, and it captures the reader's imagination and attention. Here's an example then from last week's work about based on an icon. So we're going to read through it and we're going to think about what sentence types have been used initially. So it says, I think that Marcus Rashford is a hero. I think he's a hero because he's improved the lives of lots of children. He has asked the government to give families vouchers to help buy food over the summer holidays. He's used his status as a footballer to highlight the problem, and the government have listened. Marcus deserves to be congratulated, and more people should follow in his footsteps in order to help others. So it's quite sensible. It makes sense. However, everything's getting a bit repetitive. So let's have a look. We start off with a simple sentence. We've then got a complex sentence because we've got that conjunction because in the middle. So that gives us, I think that he's a hero because he's improved the lives of lots of children. But then look what happens. We've then got a series of compound sentences for the rest of the paragraph. It means that we don't have a lot of flow. It means that we don't have a lot of difference, and things start to get a little bit boring and monotonous again. Let's have a look at the same topic, but a different structure. So we've got the same type of information, but here we've really thought about crafting our sentence structure. So here we've got Marcus Rashford. The goal-scoring 22-year-old is not only getting attention for his football skills, his powers of persuasion have also catapulted him into the limelight. At only 22 years old, he's fighting to improve the lives of children in the UK. By directing his influence towards the government, he persuaded them to give families vouchers in order to buy food over the summer holidays. The government have listened. The government have acted, all because of Marcus Rashford. Congratulate him, follow in his footsteps, help others. So let's have a look more closely at what we've included here. So we've started off with a minor sentence. It's just his name, but it gives focus to that iconic figure. If we're thinking about why these people are our heroes, if we're drawing attention to them, it gives them more importance and more status. We've then gone on with a complex sentence, embedding that detail. So it gives us more of a picture, a bit more information, and it makes it more interesting. We've then got a declarative. At only 22 years old, he's fighting to improve the lives of children in the UK. Remember that sentences can be more than one sentence type. So here We've got a complex sentence, but it's also a declarative because it's stating a fact. We then add another complex sentence. By directing his influence towards the government is going to be our subordinate clause. So if you start off with a word like by or at, it's going to force you to make a complex sentence, and that's going to give a little bit more variety and rhythm to your work. We've then got a nice simple sentence. The government have listened. Again, it brings attention to a bit of information. We've then got another declarative. The government have acted, all because of Marcus Rashford. And then we've got a series of imperative sentences. Congratulate him, follow in his footsteps, help others. By ending on those imperatives, we're giving a command, an instruction to our reader. We're talking directly to them, and it's going to make them think, hang on a minute, they're talking to me. I need to do something as well. So it's a direct appeal to your audience, and they're going to feel a bit more involved with your text. So all of these things, they may seem quite simple, or they may seem on the surface to be quite unimportant, but actually they're subtle and engaging ways of grabbing your reader's attention and really making them take an interest and have a higher engagement in your work. So finally, we're going to have a look at sentence starters. So it's not just the sentence types that we have to think about, it's the way that we start our sentences as well. This can also have an impact on our readers' engagement and enjoyment of the text that we're trying to create. So if we go back and have a look at the first example for our icon writing, we've got two main ways in which we've started our sentences. We've got a series of pronouns. So whether that's the first person pronoun I or the third person pronoun he, it's quite repetitive. It's very easy to start a sentence with a pronoun. I think, they are, he is, but it does get very monotonous and repetitive after a while. The only other way that a sentence has been started in this example is with a proper noun. And again, that's just another way of including the person. So pronoun and proper noun are very similar ways to start a sentence, and they're not particularly engaging or exciting. So again, it means that this text isn't particularly sophisticated or engaging. Let's have a look at the next example then. So we do start off with a proper noun, but it's that minor sentence, and it grabs the attention and it puts the focus on the icon that we're talking about. We then have quite a few determiners. We've got the goal-scoring 22-year-old. So it's giving us more information about Marcus Rashford, but it's kind of carrying on and helping with the cohesion, and that's something that we looked at in last week's session. So a couple more determiners: the government, the government. I would normally advise against using too many determiners in your work. However, if you look at those last sentences there, we've got an example of anaphora. We've got an example where we use the opening of a sentence more than one time. So the government have listened, the government have acted. That's actually really quite sophisticated, because it's giving us an example of how Marcus has changed the situation, and it's bringing the focus on the results of his actions. So you can use determiners to start sentences, but think about them very carefully. Do it for effect. We've then got a couple of sentences that start with prepositions. We've got at and by. If you notice, at only 22 years old, comma, he's fighting to improve the lives of children in the UK. By directing his influence towards the government, he has persuaded them to give families vouchers in order to buy food over the summer holidays. By putting your preposition at the start of your sentences, you're forcing yourself to make a complex sentence. You're forcing yourself here to create a subordinate clause that you're then going to explain by having a main clause. So it's only 22 years old, doesn't make sense by itself. You need to have a main clause afterwards to help that sentence make sense. So prepositions are really useful at creating different sentence types. We've then got verbs at the start of the sentence, and we know now that verbs create these imperative sentences. It gives us a command, it gives us instruction, and having that at the end makes us come away with the idea that we should do something about it as well. So using different sentence starters gives different feel, a different sophistication, a different level of engagement to our text. I've just put a table of different ways that we can use sentence starters, and it's something that we can look at all the way through school. So we look at this all the way through our time in English, because it's a really good way of thinking about how to start your sentences. So we're not always starting with the pronoun I or he or they. We're not always starting with the determiner the. We're thinking of different ways to start our sentences and increase that level of engagement. So we could start with a verb. A present participle is always easiest. So kicking footballs isn't the only thing that Marcus Rashford is good at. You could start with an adjective. This can be quite difficult, but once you get into the idea that putting the adjective first, without putting a determiner in front of it, the vulnerable people wouldn't work, because it's the determiner that goes first. If you take away the and just put in your adjective, vulnerable people will benefit greatly from his actions. That's going to be more effective. An infinitive verb is your base form of your verb, and it will always start with to. So to sit, to run, to jump, and here to improve the well-being of young people. It's just another way of putting a different focus on your sentence. Putting a noun at the beginning of a sentence will put the focus on that particular person or thing or place. So government policy was damaging the prospects. Here we're putting the focus on the government. Again, we've taken away the determiner because we know that repetition of determiners is boring and repetitive. So take that away and just put your noun. You might have to play around with that a little bit. It can be a little bit more tricky, but it is very effective. Putting a conjunction at the start will force you again to make a complex sentence. So sometimes if you're thinking, I don't know how to put in a subordinate clause, put your conjunction at the beginning. Although Rashford is a sporting hero, he's also a champion of the nation's youth. Because he championed free school meals, many families are going to benefit. Despite government objection, he stood by his beliefs. Any of those conjunctions are going to force you to have a subordinate clause at the beginning, and it's a really easy way of varying your sentence structure. Putting an adverb at the beginning, quickly the government revised their policies, again will change the pace. The odd pronoun here and there is not so bad. And we've looked at prepositions as well. So underneath all the politics and policies, if you think of a preposition about the position something can be on, so it could be by, under, underneath, behind. Any of those words would count as prepositions and will give a little bit more depth and detail to your work. So, task 3 then tells you to take your writing from last week and redraft it, focusing on improving the variety of sentences in your writing. If you didn't manage to complete the writing from last week, don't panic. Now's your chance to have a go. So we want you to write at least 2 paragraphs, including someone that you see as your icon. Think about your redraft. You've got your bronze, silver and gold there. Think about the criteria that you need to meet. It's often fun to just have a little play around with it. Sentences don't happen by accident. Writers will spend hours, days crafting and consciously thinking about what sentence type works best, what focus they want at the beginning, what kind of embedded clauses, where they want minor sentences, simple sentences, etc. So they really do make a massive difference. So try and have a little bit of fun with it, play around with it. You can do a couple of examples, and then when you finish, when you've got your finished piece of work, please do remember to send your work to your class teacher. So however you do that, whether you take a photo and send it as an email, or I know a lot of people are really into the habit of using Show My Homework now. However you do that, please make sure that you do send your hard work to your teacher so you can get the credit for it as well. I truly have seen some stunning examples of some work, and you're doing such a good job of carrying this on at home. So if you got questions, leave your class teacher now, and take care and have a wonderful week. Really looking forward to seeing you soon, hopefully, but look after yourselves.